Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast, Perform Beyond, with me, Louise Brogan, and the team from VPS. Today, we want to really get into the nitty-gritty of how we're working with clients. And of course, where do you start? You start at the beginning. Before we get started, though, I would like to just briefly get everyone who is joining me today to introduce themselves, say who you are and what your role is at VPS, starting with yourself, Colin.
Hi, good morning, Louise. Good morning, Maureen, and good morning, Priyesh. My name is Colin Lauder. I'm the operations manager with VPS, and I'm currently working on a program in the financial services sector in Dublin. Over to you, Maureen.
And Maureen?
Good morning, all. My name is Maureen Owens, and I'm the learning manager working alongside Colin with one of our clients within financial services.
And yourself, Priyesh.
Morning all. So I'm Priyesh. I'm responsible for our shared service centre out in Barcelona, where we look after all of our clients and for the training administration aspect. And I also look after the data analytics team, looking at data and insights for our clients as well.
Excellent. So, Colin, would you like to start with a bit of an overview of how we effectively onboard a new client?
Great question, Louise. And I suppose from a VPS perspective, our onboarding model and our onboarding process can vary slightly depending on who the client is and what industry we're working on. But I want to talk a little bit today, and Maureen and Priyesh can jump in a moment. But I want to talk about what we've been doing in the financial services sector over the last 5 or 6 years and the model that we did introduce with our financial services client. And it's a fairly traditional model of onboarding where we have our discovery phase, our transition phase, and our go live phase. We'll come to those in a moment. We'll talk a little bit more about each of those areas later on in the podcast. The discovery phase is really about understanding our customer. What's the scope of the work that we're being asked to do? What makes the organization, what makes the client tick? What's their vision? What's their purpose? What's their culture like? And really understanding how we're going to work together. A lot of this is driven by contract and driven by what's the ask from the client, but also from a relationship point of view and starting to build relationships with our clients. What's that look like? Who are the key people on both sides of the divide? How are we going to work together? What's it going to look like? And what are the KPIs that we need to put in place to make sure that we deliver what we need to deliver? The transition phase is the second phase, and we tend to build that from the bottom up. What's the total engagement process look like? I suppose at that stage, it's about the openness and agreeing the SLAs, understanding what we need to deliver and what role both sides play in that. In that, we do develop a 100-day plan as part of that transition phase. What are the priorities? How will we know when we've got there? What are the quality checks and balances that we need to put in place and measure as we go along? And then, of course, into the go live, which is a really exciting piece, I guess. It's about the testing, it's about the review, it's the kind of rinse and repeat of, let's see what we're doing, how are we getting on against the plan, 100-day plan. I'm starting to look at the internal process, I'm starting to look at the external influences around that plan. So that tends to be the model that we use, the discovery phase, the transition phase, and the development and implementation part. Maureen, I know you've been with our financial services client from the very start, and you would have been part of this initial discovery phase, transition phase, and for you, the implementation phase, which I know is always challenging. Anything to add to that, Maureen?
Well, yes, I suppose, here with the start of our financial services client, but just to step back a little bit, back to when I did start, I started off as one of our trainers. So one of the things we actually deliver is either face-to-face or virtual training for our clients as well. So I started off as a trainer and then progressed into the learning manager role only in the last 2 years or so. So it's important to realise that that progression piece happens on both sides, that the initiation and onboarding, best laid plans and all of that, they all change. So although we might have a 100-day plan, things will change, business priorities will change. There will be a priority coming in from the business, there will be a priority coming in from our side. And it's to ensure and reassure our clients that we have that flexibility. So although we have a plan, and it's really important that we stick with that plan, but we also have the availability and the option to deviate from that plan because, things do change. Regulator might come in and look for something out of the blue. So yes, it's really important that we have the initiation and the plan, but that can change and adapt as we go. So it was a bumpy road, let's just say at the start. The client was new, we were new, we were learning to work well together. And we mentioned previously about how important it is to work as a partnership. And that takes a bit of time. That doesn't happen on day one, but that's all part of the initiation stage and getting to know each other. And as we get to know each other, we can adapt and amend and work better together. So yes, it was a bumpy road, but I can happily say 5 years plus on, we're in a good, smooth journey. We're in a good place on both sides. And that does take a little bit of give and take on both sides.
Maureen, I have a question for you there. Do you think that working in the building alongside your client helps to smooth out those bumps in the road? And I was wondering if you'd be able to share an example of one of those bumps, possibly.
Well, I suppose that one of the major bumps we had at the start was it was new. So although I have quite a few years experience in financial services, every financial institution is somewhat different. So what I would have done in company A might be slightly different to company B. And I suppose it's getting that across. So they were some of the bumps where it's very easy to say, well, when I worked for company A, we did it like this. But now I work for company B. So we have to make sure that those bumps are consistent, that like we get over those bumps, that I take my learning and my experience. And that's really important because our client trusts us because we have the best people in the industry working for us within VPS. And that comes across to our clients, so our clients can trust us. So once they know we have the knowledge in the background, we've earned that trust straight away. So yes, it was difficult, and I'm not going to lie that it wasn't, it genuinely was, but we've come out the other side of that. You know, being on site with the client is an awful lot easier. Like we worked with this client during COVID. So if you think about it, I went as a trainer at that time, delivering face-to-face delivery, to all of a sudden, we'd nothing. Like, and when I say we had nothing, I mean we'd nothing. We'd no Zoom. It was before the days of Zoom, but yet we still had to service that client. We still had to offer training, support, and delivery, and it was all done on Skype without a camera. How difficult was that? But we managed to work with the client to get through that. So since COVID, we're back on site with the client, and it does make life that little bit easier that we can go for coffee, we can have a chat, you can nab somebody, you know, as you're walking by their desk. Back to that relaxed, casual environment that is really important within our industry.
Yeah, it's a good point, Maureen. You know, you talk there about the flexibility needed. You know, I talked earlier about the 100-day plan, and of course, it doesn't always go to plan.
No.
Particularly talked about the regulator there. We know financial services is a heavily regulated environment and industry, and we've had to make adjustments along the journey. Even today, we're still making adjustments to everything that we do. So it's a really good point, and I think it's a point to get across to the listener that it's just not smooth all the time. Every day is very different. And if you work in operations and you work in training delivery, my goodness, we would have some stories, Maureen, about how we deliver across the patch.
But that's what keeps it interesting, right?
Absolutely. Every day is a school day.
Yeah, and I think being on site, you know, face to face with our clients definitely helps. It helps build that relationship, and it also helps us really understand how the business works from a day-to-day basis. I mean, as we're talking about transition, usually our transition sort of means in the first, we have a transition team that comes on board and visits the clients to really understand how they work. And that includes having interviews, running workshops, and really document what is actually happening in the business as it is today. And that leads to us also building a operations manual. So this is then that transition team building a manual, and that's then shared with the local team that are going to work the program, and also through our shared service center. So we can then separate the roles and responsibilities of each of these areas. And then based on that information, we use a workflow management system, which helps us track every step of the administration process. So how the data will flow from a local team to the central administration center through to instructors, as Maureen was mentioning earlier, is all tracked through the workflow management system. And every customer's business model is different. So our workflow management system is catered to the requirements of that. And through that as well, we track the SLAs and KPIs as well. So we know exactly at what point things are working well. And if things are not, then we can always tweak them as we go along to ensure that we're meeting the requirements and providing the service as we do. And this all feeds into the 100-day plan, as we mentioned earlier, where we're looking at the roles and responsibilities of everyone, ensuring that we meet that, and also where the customer touch points are as well. And this is also then fed back to the customer on regular meetings, so which also happen on site, face to face as well.
I have a side question. We love data and spreadsheets.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm one of those sad people that love data and spreadsheets. I've been working with data for many a year, and yeah, most of the things we do have traditionally been born in an Excel, and now as time has gone on, we've gone to online MI reporting as well. So what we do now is an MI reporting package will be part of what we provide to the customer, and they can log in themselves and see the data, whether that's whether we're talking about operational reporting or whether we're talking about the strategic reporting as well. So all of that is fed into the MI, and we do definitely use that. But yeah, as I say, I'm one of those sad people that loves Excel spreadsheets.
Not sad. I think we all depend on you.
I think that's a good point, though. I think that's a good point, because our client in financial services loves data as well. And certainly I know Priyesh and his team in the whole data analytics area are kept pretty busy with our client in terms of reporting data. But that's good in a way. It kind of helps us from an SLA KPI perspective, really understanding how we're performing, and helps that integration, helps that collaboration it become even closer with the client. And that can only be a good thing, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have talked a little bit about this 100-day plan. Do you want to share a little bit more about that? Who's in charge of that?
So it usually starts with the transition team, I guess. As they come on board, they start building this 100-day plan. I mean, we have, if you like, a skeleton 100-day plan that we use. But as we said, the customers and clients are always very different in how their business works. So that needs to be adapted. And as we go through these interviews and workshops, this 100 days plan is tweaked to the requirements of the customer. So it will start with an initial understanding of the business. What are the different parts of the business that we interact with? What are the roles and responsibilities? And it will go through things like how a course is planned. Where does the information come from for planning these courses? How do we build the annual plan of courses? How does the catalogue look? How often do we refresh that catalogue? And all the way through to administration, and all the way through to how logistics are done for a training course, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's virtual. Is there any materials required, handouts required for face-to-face training? If it's virtual, what is required? How is the virtual room created? And it goes to all these finer details, and that's what then feeds the workflow, and then it also enables us to, regardless of where we're managing out of Barcelona or the local country or the local site, we're able to manage the business seamlessly and through a standard process.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really, really clear description, Priyesh. Thank you. Have you guys anything else that you want to include about how we really kick off with a new client, or shall we discuss what we'll be talking about in our next podcast?
I think we've everything covered.
Priyesh has summed it up really nicely there, and the existence and the constant tweaking of the 100-day plan is obviously critical to successful conclusion, if you like. And when we go live, it's making sure that we then have the KPIs in place that measure what we're doing. But that will feed nicely into our next podcast, Louise, around governance and how we set up sort of governance models with our clients, and we'll talk about KPIs and we'll talk about SLAs.
Excellent.
And Maureen and Priyesh will be joining us for that one as well.
All right, guys, I'm looking forward to hearing all about how basically you keep yourselves right.
Thank you, Louise.
Join us on the next podcast. And if you want to subscribe, you won't miss any of the podcast episodes. And do remember to give us some ratings and reviews, and share this with somebody who you think would find it valuable. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you.